What if I told you that most of what you believe about sports betting is wrong? Does defense really win championships? And are there mysterious people in Vegas that know everything? Today's guest is living proof that success in sports betting isn't about who you know, it's about what you know. Seth from BTB Analytics has done what many of you have had a lot of trouble doing, and that's beating the NFL market, and he's done it 2 years in a row. He did it by combining his unique background in pharmacy and health economics with cutting-edge sports analytics. In this episode, Seth reveals the truth about building winning betting models, including why most bettors are looking at the wrong stats, when you should actually be placing your bets, and why understanding market dynamics is more important than knowing the game itself. I'm John Statsational Alicia. This is the Bettor Thinking podcast, where we break down the science of successful betting through conversations with the sharpest minds in the industry. Let's get started with Seth. Seth, how are you?
I'm doing well. How are you, John?
Doing well, man. Thanks for coming on. Really excited to have you here.
Yeah, super excited to be here. And first and foremost, thanks so much for having me. And I feel very humbled. Most of all, not most, all of the guests you've had on this are extremely talented, intelligent, and have contributed so much. So I feel really humbled to be in that company, and hopefully I can deliver something to the quality that they have.
Well, listen, I've been following you and the other guys over at Bully the Board on TikTok for at least a couple of years, and you are every bit as sharp, if not more sharp, than most people I know, and you are a welcome addition to the podcast. Trust me. So I'm really looking forward to the conversation. Why don't you kind of start with like how you particularly got into it? I know you have a maybe a unique background as to why you're so good with modeling.
Yeah. I have, in some ways, I have a traditional background. In some ways, probably very untraditional. So I actually went to graduate school for pharmacy to be a pharmacist. And when I was there, I got super interested in, you're learning evidence-based medicine, you're learning like guidelines. And this is all, derived from looking at outcomes research. So I got really interested in like, how do you do that? How do you study that kind of stuff? And ended up pursuing a master's degree in health economics in that same time. And so I was, sitting in these classes, and I was never really super into sports betting, but I had a lot of friends that were, and it was always curious to me how people were pricing things. And this is before I knew anything about, I was classic like Wizard of Oz character Vegas, and they know all these things, but I was always curious, and I was sitting, in these classes and learning statistics and modeling, and at some point it kind of clicked. I was like, oh, like this is basically what you would do, I assume, right? Like, then I kept learning, and over the years kind of picked more and more up, and then I learned the story of Bill Bentor, and I'm not sure if you're aware of his story, but in the late 80s, basically him and a couple other guys took huge computers at that time in the size of rooms and went to China and basically figured out how to model out horse racing, and they were very, very successful, over $1 billion syndicate. And it was kind of the serendipitous, connecting of dots. Like I was, learning this stuff. I was, being, trained in economics, but then it was kind of learning the story and connected the dots. Like, oh, not only this is how it would be done, people have done it. And that kind of led me down a pathway of passion and, learning and growing. And here we are today. We started BTB Analytics, which was formerly Bully the Board. We ended up changing the name just because Bully ends up getting a little tough to use on social media. So
yes,
we thought a little bit smarter, and we built our first model. The first models I ever built were around 2019 in the NBA, but then moved into football, specifically NFL, and built our first try at a model in 2021, and then very quickly realized with people you've had on like Ed Miller, yeah, you're betting into a market. You're not just and I didn't know that, right? I was thinking, well, how many people have the backgrounds I have and are pricing sports? Now I know the answer is a shit ton of them, and it's a lot of really, really, really smart people. But at that time, I was thinking, no, there's no way people are doing this. And then so we started to iterate, and we were able to beat the market now 2 years in a row with coming to the market in a proper way, I would say.
So you beat the market 2 years in a row. In which sports was that?
So we've beaten markets NFL sides and college football sides. We also have futures models where we've done fairly well with those, but obviously something a little bit separate, but in those sports as well.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, look, the NFL is getting more and more difficult to beat. When I started modeling, I mean, it's been close to 15 years. My first couple of years, actually, were like low 60%, which is crazy. Never saw that again. Yeah, never saw it again. And this year was actually a down year. My first down year in a long time. It's going to happen. But it's extremely difficult. So impressive. Anytime you could win. And you guys were, what was the percentage you guys were at in the NFL this year?
We were right under 55%.
Yeah, that's great.
54 and change, and right around 53 in college football. So ironically, a little bit more competitive in NFL, which is, kind of the opposite of what we've thought, but we've been around that the last 2 years. And I'm sure we'll talk about some of the hypotheses we have in our models and like kind of what we think we are bringing to the market. But yeah, we've learned a ton. Like, just starting with that, you're betting into a market, right? I think you were talking about, the stuff you see on social media, and we do a ton of education around that because to me, that's where it all starts. I think so much of the people that are starting to get into sports betting, and it's obviously a ton, they're easily fooled by the marketing and they're easily fooled by touts because no one understands that. Yeah, no, this is a market. Just like you're going to buy Tesla stock, like you got to understand these numbers aren't just put up there. They're not just random. They don't just come from some, back room somewhere. These are highly informed, and you need to come with some type of hypothesis of some type of idea that is, adding to a market, not just ideas about how sports work. And I think that's where a lot of people get sports betting wrong, recreational.
Yeah, you talk about hypothesis. That's interesting because for me, I don't know if it's the same thing with you guys. If I'm going to try and build a model, I'll start with a hypothesis and then see if it works. As opposed to, I think a lot of people, especially you'll see things from the announcers where, I name the cliche.
Yes.
Defense wins championships, and then you're going to bet based on the best defense. Something that's very basic, but something like that. So, do you have any hypothesis that kind of played out that you've seen success with?
And that's exactly right. Every model we build is us, and that's really what models are. Models are a tool to quantify some effect that you think may or may not exist. And to your point, a lot of these anecdotal effects, when you start pulling back the data, they're not there. They're not there. In fact, defense wins championships. I don't know what you've seen in your data analysis. In my data analysis of NFL football, offense wins championships.
100%.
And the outliers are these defensive teams. And yeah, so it's testing those things, and that's a lot of where the work is. We people always ask us like, and they obsess on like, okay, how fast do you have to run the numbers and like all this stuff, and it's like all of the hard work is done in the off season where you're doing hours and hours and hours of trying to quantify and do all this time. By the time the season gets here, you're kind of running the stuff, and then you're measuring some things like CLV, but you're pretty confident in your process, and so you're betting the process. Things that we focus on specifically in the NFL, I would say the quarterback. We derive most of our, if not all of our value by modeling out certain aspects of quarterback play, a little bit more unique than I think the rest of the market does. Now, I want to also be fully self-aware. We can bet openers. When we're talking about what the market we're beating openers. We don't even start caring about what the market does, say Wednesday morning. We know we cannot compete at that level, so we don't try. And I think also that's some of the self-awareness that we try to educate. I think a lot of recreational bettors with some of the mental models that I hear people talk about and the things that they do focus on could be actual effects, but they bet them on Sunday morning. And so by then, all of the other intelligent people have already bet that angle, and it's already reflected in that number. So that's, another aspect of that too. In college football, we've spent a lot of time trying to figure out college football. I would say a little bit more because from a betting standpoint, there's a lot more opportunity there just because of the volume, right? You get upwards of 60 games a weekend. And so we've used some things like weighted EPA was one of the new variables we used this year that we saw some fairly good success with, which is basically what types of play plays are more associated with, in this case, covering or winning. And, upweighting those versus downweighting some things that are less important. And then we've collaborated a lot with the kind of, I would say, young, new football minds, Tage, Seth, Parker Fleming. If you're not following them, like, they're just troves of knowledge. And the thing that they both have spent a lot of time on, and this is true of the NFL, but obviously college as well, teams that throw a ton on first and second down and do so successfully, a la Cincinnati Bengals are probably one of the best examples in the NFL. Quantifying that effect, we've seen some alpha there. So I'll give some of the secrets. But it's a lot of learning and iterating, a lot of it.
Yeah, I would imagine so. And I know that from my own experience. Do you think it's possible for the average person to win? The guy who just says, hey, I know the sport really well, and they're not necessarily building a model. They're just kind of they're doing the old school handicapping with a pencil and paper. Is it possible nowadays to be able to do that?
I think the only way I think there's two ways they could win. I think that they could potentially win if they start betting openers. And, I always tell people this. If you think you're so good, start betting openers, start betting Monday morning, and start measuring CLV. Is your mental model as good as you think it is? Until you really start measuring that kind of stuff, it's even hard for me to understand. But, I'm sure you see, there are some really intelligent people out there that when they quote unquote know ball, they pick up on a lot of the nuance. But, when you're using a mental model, it's hard to quantify those things. But I'm sure in those unique cases, if you can show up to the market early enough where none of that stuff is reflected, sure, maybe. And then stealing from Ed Miller, because I couldn't agree more from the logic of sports betting and your interview with him, is these people that watch, all of the games, these live betting opportunities, and as Ed talks about, you're really seeing in these live models a reflection of median types of results and data, right? They're reflecting a lot of median type analyses, meaning what does an average team do? What does an average team look like? Well, if you know that, like Dan Campbell, I'm sure at this point the market's caught up, but like if you knew 2 years ago that he was always going for it on fourth down and that's going to lead to more scoring and, late in games, like maybe you could pick up on that and maybe you could beat it. So I think those are the two major ways that I think it could be done. Is it probable? Nah, that's a bit of a different conversation.
Are you tired of chasing losses and following touts who disappear after a cold streak? Well, we've all been there. Burning money on bets that seem like locks, following so-called Twitter experts with fake records, and wondering if anyone actually makes money betting sports. Well, that's why we built the Sharp app, a premium sports betting intelligence platform that's helping our members consistently find edges and make more informed betting decisions every single day. Our Proptimizer is trusted by thousands of verified users in our Discord community who openly share and track their success. No hiding, no deleting tweets, just real results you can verify yourself in our active community. Sharp app gives you professional-grade tools designed specifically for Prize Picks, Underdog, Sleeper, DraftKings Pick 6, No Vig, Parlay Play, Hot Streak, and Flip. Download the Sharp app today at sharp.app and use code THINKING35 for 35% off your subscription. That's sharp.app and code THINKING35. Stop gambling, start winning with the Sharp app. You keep talking about opening line, and I know that's something that you stress on TikTok. A lot of your videos, You've got both positive and negative feedback in the comments. And listen, I'm with you on the opener being a little bit soft, but why don't you go into some of the stuff that you talk about on TikTok as to just how the market, you keep talking about the market, and it is a market. I mean, how is it a market? Like,
Sure.
Kind of clarify that.
So the NFL, I think, is probably the one of the easiest examples to understand. So when we're talking about a market, we're talking about basically a couple of different types of books. We call these market making books, and Circa is, I would say, the one of the better known ones, and one based in the U.S. And so basically Sunday night, when the Sunday night football game starts it's about 8:20 Eastern, they put up the opening lines for the next Sunday's game. So literally a week in advance, they put up the first numbers. Now, circa, they put up these numbers, they're willing to take a $5,000 bet from anybody, right? So if Billy Walters comes in or Barbara Walters comes in, they're going to take the $5,000. The reason we harp on this is because, again, it's the book's best guess. It's not just a random number. They for sure do some modeling and they have some information. It's not a full guess, but it's not informed by any really deep methodologies, right? If you have, some effect that you've picked up over the years, either mental model or actual statistical model, this is the time to bet it because there's really not a lot of information injected. Now, all of the people at Open that are, at kind of what I would say my level, which is semi-professional or just kind of lower level syndicates, again, you can bet 5K max. What's happening is you're getting an injection of liquidity, but the market at market making books, specifically Circa, they'll move the line based off that action. So if they put up a -2 Washington Commanders and we bet it, they'll move it to 3. But then if you come along, John, and you bet the +3 the other side, they'll move it back. And so this is going on, and you'll see quite a lot of movement at Open. But then on Monday morning, they'll raise the limits to 10,000. On Tuesday, they'll raise it to 20,000. Wednesday, 30,000, all the way up to kickoff where they're willing to take about 100, 150, 200K bet. And the reason this is all going on is because everyone is injecting their quote unquote opinion, their model. Maybe there's some guy out there that has only injury news. Well, now his information is baked in that line. And so it's really the efficiency hypothesis, right? Where you're saying the liquidity is driving efficiency. And so as more people are injecting liquidity, that's basically equaling efficiency. And the book is willing to up those limits as they take more and more bets, aka they get more and more information from professional bettors about where the line should be. So that's what we basically try to teach people, that's actually what's going on versus like a Wizard of Oz character that's sitting in a back room just that knows everything.
And no, excuse me. Yeah, I brought this up on another podcast. I don't remember if it was with Ed or not, but you hear a lot of the public, you'll see it on Twitter all the time when a game lands on a number or when, there's something crazy happens and like these guys in Vegas always know it. But it's really not some magical person in Vegas. It's an entire market that is coming up with that number.
The market knows. The market knows what's right. And that's like the part that we try to harp is basically when you open your app on Sunday morning to make your bets, I get that it's super entertaining to bet on these games. I get it. Like I've definitely placed bets from an entertainment standpoint. But the thing that I want people to understand is when you're betting at that point, if you think you really have an edge, you're basically saying, I know more than the market does at this point. And quite frankly, you don't. So just either chalk it up to understand that you're betting, you're just basically betting coin flips and you want some entertainment, and that's cool too. But if you're really serious about trying to win and beat the market, that's where I think a lot of people, if they just understood, like, oh, I should have looked at these lines 5 days ago, they might help themselves quite a lot.
When we talk about mental models, what I tell people is, look, you may not be some great modeler, or you may not have the statistics background. But like you said, there are some people who are really sharp, kind of know the game or whatever the sport may be.
Yeah.
What I think those people need to do is actually come up with lines on their own, just like you would do with a model.
Yeah.
And then compare it to the market. And like you said, really what you want to see, if we're talking about the NFL here, come up with your lines and then see, are you getting CLV, which you mentioned earlier, which is closing line value, right?
Yeah, exactly. Because, closing line value is our best leading indicator of a true edge. Win rate can be really fickle. And I'm sure we've both been on the edges of, a lot of winning and then a lot of losing, right?
Yes.
And so neither of those samples are representative of your true edge, right? If you're on a win streak, that you're seeing positive variance. If you're on a losing streak, you're probably seeing negative variance, right? But what makes you understand if you're good better, bad better, or if you're seeing variance, if you're consistently beating markets, well, then probably you have an edge, right? And so your win rate will catch up to you at some point. And so, yeah, exactly, right? If people do that, they can measure that and they say, yeah, look, my process is leading to CLV. It's probably not a bad process.
If I picked 100 games and I wanted to analyze my, how well I'm doing getting closing line value, one, is 100 games enough? And two, how would you do it? How would you analyze it? Would I just throw it in a spreadsheet, look at an average, how many times I beat the number? How would you do it?
Yeah, so you can. There's many different ways to skin this cat, and I would say for somebody that's just starting, I would look at the percentage of times you saw CLV relative to the closing line, and I wouldn't devig it. I wouldn't go down the crazy rabbit hole. I would just say, in 100 games that I measured, did I beat the closing line value? And I think you should be shooting for 55 to 60%. If you're really truly not looking at the market at all, like you come up with a number completely independent. If you beat the market 60% of the time of a completely independent process of the market, I think that's pretty good. You could probably get higher than that number, and it gets further nuanced because then you can look at devigging the number to see if you beat the fair price without the vig price in and all these other more complicated prices, but or pieces. But if you were to just do that, I think 55 to 60% is a probably solid process.
So yeah, I mean, like I said, I just think it's a really valuable exercise to go through if you are a sports bettor. Just every week. I mean, we're recording this now at the end of the NFL regular season.
Yeah.
But you can do it with all sports. I mean, the NBA is going to be the day before, and you could always look ahead at those lines. And you guys, you mentioned it, and so you're doing NFL, you're doing college football, and you just started with college basketball. Is that right?
Yeah, we're building out some tools of college basketball. We're trying to figure out, if we can. We've learned such a tremendous amount of stuff in trying to figure out how to actually bet NFL and college football that we have figured out some methods to basically price some of this stuff. And so we're right now kind of testing what does this all look like? Automating a lot of it, and then really just back testing in real time, which is, can we actually see an edge and realize an edge using some of the methods that we've kind of learned from. So it's like, how do you price sides? How do you price totals? That's you spend all this time creating models. All right, you make the number -2 and the market is -3. What? And so
Right.
What's the cover probability? You got to there's always the next. So because we've kind of had to figure out a lot of that stuff, we're trying to see if we can basically bring some of those learnings to the college basketball market.
Well, that actually brings me to another point here. So when you're looking at different sports, right? So 1 point between 2 and 3 in the NFL is going to be drastically different than 1.2 and 3 in college basketball. As a matter of fact, the 1 point between 19 and 20 in college basketball is going to be drastically different than 2 and 3, right? So, so that's something we have to take into account as well. What are you looking at as far as an edge? Are you looking at the spread, an edge in the spread in order for you to trigger a bet? Are you looking at an edge on the probability or maybe an implied odds and the probability that you're putting on the game? How are you guys figuring out where when you have a large enough edge to make a bet?
Yeah, exactly. So I would say we're a little unconventional here, and it's a little informed by my background / a little informed by I would say typical processes. So where we start is we create a number, and from that number we actually do, and I encourage, this is this is definitely some advanced aspect of forecasting, because we talked about that you're betting into a market. That market actually has information. So ignoring that the market is -3, if you make the number -2, isn't actually that wise, because again, it's not just a number. It has something there. It's not just random. And so we usually then regress our forecast to the market. So we'll basically take the market, we'll take our number, we'll come up with a new blended number. And this bears out in the statistics. You can either look at a loss function or you can look at a Breyer score. You will see, if you do this, that your forecasts improve. So that's first and foremost. So then, okay, you have this new forecasted number. So we take that forecasted number, what we call the truth, and then we take that and we combine it or look that up against what the actual market is. So we know what the implied break-even probability is from what the price of the market is. Usually we're betting into -110 markets. Sometimes that's not the case, but we can, basically take that price, and then we can know what the number in the market is. So say it's -3, we make the number, say the market is -2 and we think the number should be -3. So this is a case where we would bet the favorite. You've talked about 3 being a key football number. at that key football number, or going from 2.5 to 3, you will see quite a big bump in cover probability. So what we've developed, and from people like Robbie at NFELO and others, Ryan Sides, and many other people have contributed to this work. There are methodologies for basically how you can create what we call value frameworks. And basically a value framework is a crosswalk or a lookup table to say, okay, well, the market's 2.5, I make it 3, cover probability is X. And so we usually in the NFL will bet only anything where we see a 4% edge. Again, a 4% edge at open is doable. 4% edge at close probably doesn't exist in my opinion. At least with our methodologies. Maybe there are people that sharp enough. And so that's what triggers a bet for us. We'll sometimes there'll be nuance, and then again, sometimes price plays. It always should play a key, but sometimes you're willing to spend a little bit more to get a key number. Sometimes you can get it on sale and you can lay minus 105. So there's a little bit of nuance to that, but ultimately, what is our truth, our number? Then we shop that relative to the market, and then we have basically value frameworks that will convert those two numbers into a cover probability. College, we're a little less restrictive. We'll bet anything with a 3% edge.
Okay. And now, are you using, as far as bet sizing, are you using a Kelly criteria?
Yeah. So, and I really respect all the work you're doing here with the interviews, because you've gotten a lot of great answers here. And I think relative from what I think I've learned, similar to you, I think we use some version of a flat bet. We're not. I would say I'm a little afraid of Kelly. And I think, I don't know if I formed that opinion on my own or just listening to others. But we basically flat bet a 40% Kelly criterion in NFL and a little less in college, only because college's volume can just get crazy. Like, we'll have weekends where we'll bet 20 games. So if you were using Kelly, and I think one of your guests has, picked up on this nuance, like, the problem with Kelly is, like, not all of those games grade at the same time. So, like, when exactly do you have that bankroll? What if you have a good day? What if you have a bad day? All of us, well, technically you may have overbet. So flat bet for the most part. And, we really won't touch that until maybe the next season. If we see a really, really great year, we've been fortunate to not see any really negative years, but those, I think, are the time when you would want to reassess, like, okay, next season or whatever, next sport, are we going to increase our flat bet Kelly? I think that's, to me, when I'd think about that. But in season, I feel much more comfortable, like, kind of knowing what that unit is week in, week out.
Yeah, I've fallen into that as well, and I've been doing it for years. But I will adjust when I hit a certain threshold.
Okay.
So what I try to tell people is
something.
Exactly. So I'll tell people, look, if you start with $1,000 bankroll and you want to play 1 or 2% of that bankroll as your unit size, as you maybe get to $1,100 or $1,200, maybe you want to increase it. Or if you get down to $900, $800, and it's sort of doing what Kelly does, and you're keeping it. See, my whole thing is, I had a professor in college in a business class, and he said, what's the most important thing, or what's the number one thing every business is trying to achieve? And everyone in the class, raised their hand. They're like, well, they want to make a profit. And that's actually not the answer. The answer is, you need to stay in business, right? So your number one goal in business is to stay in business. And I view this, as I know you do, as a business. So you could be the greatest handicapper in the world. If you have no bankroll, it's kind of useless.
Yeah, and forgive me, I forget the author's name, but he just wrote the book, How Much Did You Lose? And
Dad Abrams. Yep.
Yep. He's done a great work on looking at this, and it was really eye-opening on, like, you start overbetting Kelly ever so slightly, that your expected return starts to go negative. I couldn't agree more with all of that. And I do agree. I think it was one of your guests as well. Kind of, people harp a lot on the bankroll management aspect of things. It's insanely important. I'm not going to lie. It is obviously a major part of betting, especially if you want to try to do it professionally. But I think for the recreational bettor, like, they have so many bigger leaks in their game. Like, if they could just lose 2% less and keep the same betting patterns, they probably end up losing a lot less. But I couldn't agree more. And that's our approach. And the other thing too, to peel the curtain back, at least on my perspective, and I don't know if you've had, this perspective, is also betting. The better you get, the larger you're betting. That isn't just like a muscle that you have. People, they just kind of romanticize what this looks like. If you were betting $100 and now you're betting, 1,000, 10,000, like that is a muscle that for sure has to be strengthened, and consistently betting, $5K a week every game or whatever it is, as you get better and better and your bankroll gets bigger. Like for me, that's been a muscle that for sure I have to get stronger at, because that's not just natural to me. No. That you're just, and again, you're doing this with an edge, but you see variance, and it's also mentally sometimes difficult. You could see a negative variance weekend. You could go 1-3 and you run your numbers and you got another 6 games that you have an edge on. You need to have the mental fortitude and process that you believe, okay, I should keep firing. I should keep doing this, because that is also, no touts telling you they're with their Lamborghini, the losing aspect of this.
Yeah.
It's no fun. And plus BTB Analytics, he had a really good quote that I can't get out of my head. I forget when he tweeted it, but it was in the last 6 months. But the difference between a winning model and a losing model, winning models lose 45% of the time, and winning models lose 45% of the time, and losing models win 50% of the time. Those margins are just razor thin.
Yeah, I mean that's what all advantage gambling, and people don't realize in all these things. Like, they see these card counters, like the Vegas card count. Now, I never really did much card counting, but all you're doing is flipping the edge from maybe 1.5% to the house to 1.5% to you. So it's a numbers game. You have to be playing. So you need the bankroll to be able to survive, and you need to play enough that the numbers are going to eventually move in your favor. And I think the hard part with sports, I don't know how you look at it. I've gotten so numb to the actual game itself that I look at them like numbers on a screen now, and I go, well, listen, this is a 55% chance to win, or if I'm looking at the money line on a game, I'll give you, for instance, I do a bunch of Survivor videos, and they're fairly popular on YouTube for Survivor. And I've had people argue in the comments, of course, that when I say, look, don't handicap the games, because, as you say, it's a market. So if we just look at the probability, if we do the implied probability, we take the money lines, if we, I'll devig the money lines, whatever it is, and come up with a probability that a team's going to win. I'm not trying to handicap, because even as good, I'm better than most at the handicapping aspect. It's still just a slight edge. That I'd rather just take the market. And I'm playing that. It's a different game. I'm not betting now. Now I'm just taking that against, what I'm playing some sort of game theory in a Survivor pool. And so, in other words, my pick in a pool that I'm in there with you, where it's only me, you, and one other person, might be a different pick than if I'm in that same week with the same teams available to me with 2,000 people left. Like, I'm playing different games. So yeah, I mean, I forget where we started with that. I kind of went off on a little bit of a tangent there.
Yeah, but you were just talking about the edges and how razor thin they are.
Yeah, and they are. It's razor. It's extremely thin, and I don't know if you get it. So now that you're involved it's been, I guess, 5 or going on 6 years now that you're kind of involved in this, and I'm sure you were starting this even before. Do you have friends who really are just the casual bettor who now maybe were not involved in sports betting, or now recently want to get involved in sports, and then they think, hey, if I call Seth, he's going to make me a millionaire overnight? Because I get that quite a bit.
Yeah, and I would say results may vary, right? And I have definitely friends that are willing to learn more versus not learn more, and that's obviously a distribution just of anybody, right? I mean, we have a social media account where all we try to do is educate, and even there, you see some people that are super enthusiastic about learning, and they're they're always wanting more. And then you have other people that's like, nope, that's not how it works. You're wrong. Yeah. Okay. Sounds good. I mean, and so it's no different. Yeah, but I'm always transparent. Like, this isn't what you think it is. Like, and that's the biggest, to me, quote unquote, lie. It's professional sports betting is really not doesn't really mean anything about knowing ball, so to speak. Now, don't get me wrong. when we're talking about the mental aspect of things and like people that want to create mental models, that usually comes from quote unquote knowing ball and watching a ton of games. But like most of this stuff is like, what do I make it? Why do I make it that? Because of some effect that I think I've identified, and it covers at this probability. And if I can get it at that price, it's a good bet. If I couldn't get it at this price, it's not a good bet. And so like, that's not very sexy, because what are your friends and what does everyone want to bet on? They want to bet on the finals. They want to bet on the Super Bowl. They want to bet on the Penn State game tonight, the playoff game. Who's going to win? It's like, I don't know who's going to win this game. This is an insanely liquid market. You know, I can't help you on this game, but you want to bet on, you know, Western Tennessee. Sure. You know, I got a number there, but right, that's not very sexy. They want the marquee matchup, and it's all about like just knowing things. I just know who's right. And it's like, it's mostly numbers, right? It's mostly price sensitivity. That's where most of it is, right?
It's like that with everything, though. You're looking for value in any sort of I mean, if you're buying real estate, you're buying businesses, you're buying
100%.
You're just, if you can figure out the value better than the market or better than, you know, the next guy. Like if you walk into a business, I mean, if you're looking to buy a business and you realize this guy, you know, there's something he's not doing, that we can increase the revenues here by 15-20%, whatever it may be. You know, maybe just clean the place up or whatever it is. And so you see value that someone else doesn't see, or this house that's kind of run down. You're like, you know, all it really needs is a little paint and a little this, that, a little that. And we can, you know, for $20,000, I can make it $80,000 profit on this house. So, you know, that's all we're doing. And I think that's what you picked up on when you were in school and you were looking at that. You're like, hey, this is just about finding value.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And I think that's where, like, when you're talking about people asking about it. And my wife like always tells her coworkers what I do, and she gets nonstop texts. Like it'll be a big game, and they're like, "What's your husband make this game?" And it's like it doesn't work like that. Like if I did even have an edge, it's long gone by now. You know what I mean? You're screwed if you're betting now. So yeah, I couldn't agree more. That's kind of how it all works. You know. I like I said, some people are really curious about this stuff. I know that's why I'm here, right? It's just all this stuff is born out of curiosity, and so some people are gravitated towards learning how it actually works, and they want to learn how it works. I do think that sports betting is a huge source of entertainment for people, and so they kind of don't really care. Like they don't want to know how it all works. They just want like, I want to bet on this game because I'm going to watch this game.
Yeah, I know. I mean, the sausage tastes good, but you don't want to see it being made, right? So, I mean, that I totally get that, and we're seeing a lot from our subscribers. You know, these parlays have become huge. Like people just want to hit. They want to hit that plus 10,000, plus 15,000 parlay. I mean, that's just become a big thing. I don't know what your view is on, you know, those. I'm not talking about lottery ticket parlays, but would you guys throw any parlays in on stuff that you may have an edge?
Yeah, I mean, we don't. It's again though, it's all into that price conversation, right? Like, I think you see a lot of people that are on the sharp side, you know, kind of villainize parlays because it's like an exception to the rule. Like 99% of the time, parlays are horrible decisions for a recreational bettor. Now, there are these kind of edge cases, especially if you can do the work and figure out these, you know, positively and negatively correlated stuff, especially in the NFL with same game parlays. And you see, you know, people having a lot of success with that. But those are the exceptions to the rule, not the rule. I try not to get too preachy on like what people should or should not do. The one thing, again, is because most people don't understand, one, they're betting into a market, but two, those parlays basically add more and more and more vig, and there's basically a point where it's an insurmountable amount of vig. I don't care if you're Billy Walters, like you're just donezo, right? That 12-legger is not, you know, it's not sustainable even if you hit one. But yeah, for sure, to answer your question, there are quote unquote sharp parlays you can make if you can find games with 3 edge, you know, you have 4% edge in 3 NFL games, and you know the price reflects somewhat of a fair price. You know, that technically is an edge. I have to say I'm pretty conservative with my betting, and I kind of borrow this a lot from the world I came up in and still spend time in, which is like the health economics side of things. And, you know, I take a lot of care into what is when we're looking at a model, how often does that happen? But also the market, what's the implied probability of it happening? I really want to focus my bets on things that happen at a high rate. And I'm not saying you can't bet long shot parlays, and we do in the futures markets. But when you're taking plus 2,000 bets, that even if you have a 3% edge, if say the market only thinks that'll win 10% of the time, but you think it'll win 13% of the time, I don't think people understand how much you have to bet that in order to realize that 3% edge. Versus if you have the same 3% edge at a 50%, implied probability, you have to bet much, much fewer of those things happening. And, my mental state is less capable of just betting long, odd dogs. Like betting plus 2,000 to realize that edge. I don't know that I could mentally lose for 2-3 months straight. So I would say I'm much more conservative there, but value exists there. No doubt about it. Value exists there.
I think that's really important what you're saying there, because, okay, you've got your models, you've got all that, but you've got to kind of fit, what you're doing into whatever your mental makeup is as well, and your stuff, what you're comfortable doing. Before we came on there, I was getting some DFS stuff in, and I play the guy. People who know me know I play in the big GPPs, which is basically like playing tournament poker. So you're just not going to win. I mean, almost every night you lose. And it takes a certain mentality to be able to just sit there and punt away. You could lose for multiple months and a lot of money at that. So it is difficult. There are some people where you would be more of a cash game poker player.
100%.
It probably suits you better. And I think that's important for people to realize as well when they're getting involved. Do what is going to be comfortable for you and what you're capable of.
Yeah, what are you willing to endure? I think that's the biggest thing, because people don't talk about this side of it. Again, good models lose 45% of the time, bad models losing 55% of the time. So that means even if you're killing it, you're going to lose 45% of the time. Oh yeah, but wait, there's more. That doesn't come in some sexy package like, all right, here's 55, here's 45. Nope. You're going to go 0-3, 0-7, and then all of a sudden you'll hit a huge upswing, and so you got to be able to survive that next bet when you were talking about staying in business. That is the name of the game. But I would say also part of the staying in business, not only monetarily, is mentally. Can you keep your head straight enough to keep betting, keep going with, and we talked about this a little bit ago, but, I think that's a really important part of it. And I know something I try to open up more about, because it's unfortunate. Like the only people that talk about sports betting really are touts that are lying to you, and they're showing you their car or whatever. And I wish more professionals, and there are a few, right, that do it. And I always am super grateful when you can find those people, because there is no book really to what this looks like. And shout out to Ed Miller, because that's, if any of your listeners have not read The Logic of Sports Betting, read it 1 time, 2 times, 3 times. I can't tell you how important that book is for understanding sports betting and just giving you a kind of huge kind of kick in the butt on like what markets look like, how they work, and kind of how you can get going.
Yeah, he's a big proponent of know who you're betting into, and that's why when he said the live betting, I've always suspected that well, here's the thing. You mentioned getting all the on those parlays where they vig it to a point where you really can't overcome. The harder it is to price something, you can almost guarantee that they're going to vig it. It's going to be vigged at a higher rate. One, because you can't price it all that well as the bettor, and they can't price it all that well as the book, right?
Yeah, 100%. And people like Jonah throw the damn ball, right? His whole alpha and his whole edge is that he's worked at PFF, and he's just sat there and they've done so much work on just understanding how things are correlated positively and negatively. So he can price these better than most, and he cleans up on these same game parlays. But exactly right. Like when the book doesn't know, their answer to the question is just big. And that's an opportunity for you as a bettor. Like, that's the one thing I wish I could highlight to people more is we get a ton of questions like, well, how would you do this? How would you price that? How would you price this? And it's like, some of these things are impossible to price at like a crazy accurate level, meaning no one really knows. Like, you're asking me the question because you don't know, but like, people need to be also reflecting on like, if you have any data experience in background and you don't know what to do, it probably means other people don't know what to do. And maybe that's where you can attack. And I think, Ed Miller and Matthew David out of their second book, Interception, I think is basically like following that idea all the way through on maybe how to attack, where to attack, and things like that. And I got started because I had this weird background, right? And so I kind of knew where to go. I had a ton of learning to do. So, don't get me wrong. And, data, I think, is maybe the biggest part of this, because we're talking about effects, right? Cause and effect, and trying to quantify some effect that you have a hypothesis about. But all of that starts with data. And that's what I've found to be a lot of our secret sauce is, can you get good quality data? And then can you, work with it and manipulate it so that you can have these data sets that you can test these hypotheses. And I think that's where people, I see the novice, they kind of think like, oh, I'm going to go to Sports Reference, I'm going to take the box score, and I'm going to create a model, because they kind of don't have that aspect of like, no, it's a market, so like everybody already knows that, like that's like baseline, that's that's, there's nothing adding there. But it's that next level of, can you get deeper data that can kind of tease out these nuances, in places like PFF and Sports Information Solutions, SIS, if you can get their data, like, that's to me where a lot of the game kind of also sits, is the data war, like who can get the best data and who can get it in a private way. I think is another aspect of things that, we're trying to get better at, but the unfortunate part of it is data really expensive.
Yeah. Well, we are well aware, as we're in the business, and data is absolutely king. Trying to get data for the app, that's the business to get into. If you're good at it, is supplying data to on a B2B level, for sure.
100%.
That if you can do it well, do it quickly, and like you said, it's extremely valuable. So, and it's only getting more so as we get deeper into AI and all of the these other things.
Yeah, but I will say, we've beaten and built all of our models on publicly free available data sources. NFL FastR, I'm not saying it's as good as SIS, but it's damn close. Like, again, you got to spend the time. You got to, this is hundreds of hours, if not thousands of hours of data manipulation and creation, but the raw materials are there. Same with college football, CFB FastR, you can get a lot or a ton of data there. I mean, so, I don't want to discourage people. Obviously, if you can get those other data sources, they can kind of elevate you, but they're not a requirement. Like, it's basically, can you come to the market with some good ideas that the market hasn't thought about, and quantify those things. I would love to get your thought on this, though, because I get asked a lot about people, like, I get a ton of questions around people that are like just graduating or about to graduate, and they're in the computer science world, and they want to use like all of these fancy machine learning models. Like, oh, I'm going to use this neural network, I'm going to use this. And my kind of opinion is, I don't think you're going to really beat the market with modeling, surface level data with some fancy method. You're going to have to, you're better to have better data and just simple model. But what's your kind of thoughts on that?
Couldn't agree more. Yeah, could not agree more. You don't need all that. Listen, I'm not well versed in some of the newer technology and whatnot, but we were able to build, I mean, really in Excel. I mean, I built a lot of models just using Excel. So if you're good enough in Excel and you've got the right data, you're plugging away. It may take you longer, I don't know, but you can definitely do it with Excel or something similar. I think you pretty much nailed it there. Where it's really it's finding the correct data to use, and it goes back to where we started. If you have a hypothesis, start with the hypothesis.
Yep.
You think passing is ultra important. You alluded to first down passing. That's something. There may be one person who's going to now go ahead and do a deep dive into that, and they're going to be successful with it. But it's worth it. Like, that's why I like doing this podcast, because there's going to be just a snippet from each podcast
100%.
that someone's going to take, and they're going to go ahead and, we'll hear 2 years from now, I heard the podcast with Seth, and I took that one little thing and I built this whole model, and it's hugely successful. And like, that's the hope, but you have to start with that hypothesis, like you said, and build from there. And then you're going to hit a dead end and say, you know what, I was wrong. And then you have to start with a new one.
Yeah, 100%. It's iteration. That's so funny you say that. Like, that's exactly how we got started. Like, you searching for these pieces of nuggets, like who's talking about these things? Because there isn't that many people talking about these really specific problems. And shout out to Robbie from NFELO. That his work he's done. He's like an R&D website. Go to his website and he publishes like all these research projects he's done. And I can't tell you how much we've learned, and we didn't have to suffer because he was willing to like go and do the project and then publish all the learnings. And we just straight up stole his whole weighted EPA hypothesis, and we applied it to college football. And again, we it was successful for us. So, I think don't be afraid of that and embrace the learning. I couldn't agree more. Like that's basically what this is just nonstop trying and learning and growing and hitting dead ends, so many dead ends and so many sleepless nights. But that's obviously that makes sense. It's a market. So you gotta bring something to the market that they don't already know or it doesn't already know, or else, you're just reflecting what it already knows.
100%. I've mentioned this. I believe it might have been with Ed, where when you have a market, I think one of the common misconceptions, or that the novice bettor, or even people who I know for 20, 30 years who have been betting, they feel like the information, like they're the only ones who know that it's going to rain in Kentucky today, or whatever it is. And I'm like, you're not betting on any information that someone doesn't know. Now, if you've got some interesting stat that you're keying on, it, that's probably, maybe there's a few other people in the market, but it's not the market on the whole. That's a different story. If you're looking at offensive holding penalties, like like teams that are coming off of, I'm just throwing something out there, that are just had an unusual amount of offensive holding penalties last week, and that's whatever it is. You're like, okay, I'm fairly confident not a lot of people are looking at penalties, but we all know that the starting quarterback is out this week, right? So like when you tell me that I'm betting on the other team because such and such quarterback isn't playing, well, that's not very good. So actually, to touch on that, are you, with the NFL, since you do a lot of NFL and you've been successful, are you figuring out injuries for, you wouldn't want to do it for every player, I wouldn't think, but certainly the quarterbacks, maybe key players, or how deep are you going with that?
All quarterbacks.
Yeah.
So we have a methodology for all quarterbacks, and I mean, I won't tell you the secret sauce, but I can tell you that's everything. It's not everything, but meaning like there are a lot of weeks when the quarterbacks are healthy. But you're also accurately modeling when they're healthy. But yeah, that's everything. And from my understanding, on Wednesday, that's the new NFL game, quantifying injuries. And you get your first injury report. Obviously, you have some understanding of what happened the week before, but because from my understanding, these are very nonlinear effects, and some of the biggest two are on offensive defensive line matchups. And so you could have your tackle go down, and maybe your backup isn't all that bad, but then he's going up against this next level DN, and so that interaction between the original tackle that should have started but is now injured could be worth a ton of points, or you have a tackle guard combination injury. Those kinds of effects, from my understanding, are very nonlinear, and some of the bigger things. All this stuff takes insane man hours, and like these are really complicated things, you like questions, and so we're always kind of left in the off season. We usually take on one really big project, and so we have a couple of things that are on our list, and this is one of them. We have some ideas of methods to quantify every player. And from my understanding, that's where the big dogs are. The guys that are betting 100K at post, they've figured out a way to navigate it. I don't know if anybody's conquered it, but they're at least navigating it to some degree.
Yeah, I think obviously, I think everyone knows the quarterbacks, move the line, and I think some people actually probably overestimate how much running backs and wide receivers may move the line. But like you said, there's also an accumulation. If we have 2 offensive linemen out, that changes things a lot more than just having one. So, like you said, it's not linear in that each one's not worth a half a point, but combined they may be worth 1.
Yeah, and like I think there are ways that you can like to be honest, some of the things we've thought about are, and I can understand why people get more and more successful at sports betting, because what you learn from one sport, you can start to borrow ideas. And so, quite frankly, we quantify each college roster. And so we come up with a roster construction number to say this college team has X value versus that college team. And I cannot tell you how important that is in college, because there's so many of these situations where you have, whatever SEC team going up against some, almost FCS / really, not even a power 5 team, but a G5 team. And the level of athleticism is just, it's a huge effect. Because it's at every position. But
I've seen you talk about have you talked about like recruiting classes? Am I getting that right?
Yeah. So you can do blue chip ratio. That's something we use. So you can look at the proportion of 4 and 5 stars. But we take it a step further. We actually take each player's composite rating and come up with a complete roster rating based off of their total roster rating.
You're like the ultimate Madden.
It's actually it's very very similar to Madden, and I think that's funny because I can't tell you how many hater comments I would get, like, you just use, like Madden, whatever, and you're like, you don't understand how actually accurate those are. Like,
there's someone put a lot of time into that.
I know sports book. So basically, a lot of sports books, Ed talks about this. They use data services to get a lot of their lines for these like exotic stuff. I know for a fact they use Madden ratings in some of their simulations. I know this for a fact. I know some people that work there, and they use these stuff. And it makes sense. These guys, literally, they're using data to come up with these ratings. But exactly that. You can come up with rating systems, and then you can create models basically going back with lineups and saying, okay, when the tackle, you can create basically a tackle model, a guard model. You probably don't want to get that because you don't have all that much data, but maybe you have an offensive line model, a wide receiver model, and you can plug in basically the person's, what their rating was, and then what the delta is between the new player saying. And I think you can come up with a number that way. And I think that's one way to conquer that. But again, something we use in college, not exactly the same, but akin to it, you could use that. And I think the problem I struggle with in NFL is it's so difficult to beat, and it's only getting harder. And so college it's just a lot easier to beat, in my opinion. Now, we haven't had the ROI that we thought we had seen so far, but we see CLV at just so much more often. And so to me, it's like, if you have limited resource, you have limited time, I kind of lean toward just going more and more and more all in on college football, because again, it just more games, so I can get way more down. And NFL is like, as much as like I love these data problems and I want to figure them out, it's like, because this is the one of the other things I'd love to get your opinion on. This is the other side of trying to be a professional sports bettor is capital. Everybody, I always joke and I always want to make the comment on like the tout with the Lamborghini. I'm like, if you were a true professional, you would never have $250,000 in a car. Capital is so, like, people do not understand how much capital you need in order to make real money. They just think you win, and it's just like this nonstop drip. But it's like, if you want to replace a real salary, a big boy salary, like you're talking, multi-million-dollar bankrolls, and multi-million-dollar bankrolls aren't just growing on trees.
And you got to get that action down somewhere.
Yes, someone's got to take the bet.
Someone's going to take that bet, and like you said, the best time to bet is going to be that open, but they're only taking 5,000 on that bet. So listen, they're playing their game. You have to play your game. And there are a lot of games that go on a little cat and mouse, go on between the books and some of the sharpest bettors. And being with a sharp offshore book does at least give you the opportunity to get some size in. But the betting markets as well, over in Europe, we don't really have those exchanges. The betting exchanges here in the U.S., I know some people have tried it. It's tough without liquidity. They've got it at like the Betfair and other places like that overseas, where they've got just a ton of liquidity. We see a lot of syndicates and a lot of pros kind of gravitate there. Some of them just become market makers, like in the stock market. They just become market makers there. I know one of the largest MMA market maker out in Europe. And there's a lot of different ways to skin a cat when it comes to professionals in the space of sports betting. But what you said is I think is really important. Look, first of all, whether it's sports betting or real estate or stock market, when the guy leads with his Rolex and his Lamborghini, there's a good chance you shouldn't be paying any attention to what they're talking about. So, I kind of filter through with those guys. And unfortunately, the guys who get the most views on social media are typically not going to be the ones. They're very good at marketing. They're not very good necessarily at betting. I've told this story before. I don't know if I mentioned it on the podcast. I used to work in FX and currency trading. I used to do some radio, and they had asked me, this is 20 years ago, I think it was about 20 years ago, Fox Business had just started. Okay. And I had a PR woman, and she said, you're really good. I was doing radio shows for FX currency trading. And she's like, you're really good on these shows. Like, did you ever think about, Fox is starting a business channel. They want to get people's opinions, professionals' opinions on stocks. I said, well, that's not my thing. I'm not a stock trader. I work in FX. And she goes, yeah, but they really don't care about that. Like, they just care that you're good on TV.
Yeah, you articulate well. Yeah.
Right. So I learned 20 years ago that, okay, the Food Network doesn't have the best chefs, and the stock picking shows aren't the best stock pickers. Yeah. And guess what? The sports betting shows don't have the best sports bettors on them either.
Yeah. Do you, because, and I couldn't agree more. I often wonder, because we're so immature in this new U.S. sports betting market, and it's just getting flooded. We don't have California or Texas yet, so it's going to only get bigger. And gambling is unique in that I think some of these books are predatory. I do think they can and do take advantage of players, but it is a unique business in that, like, DraftKings and FanDuel's business model is to suck their customer dry. They're trying to extract capital at every bet, right? By definition. But is that sustainable? And then do you see media in sports betting media, does it somehow shift to somewhat more intelligent / trying to be more helpful, only because at some point you've sucked all of your patients dry, like, or not patients, but customers dry. Like, it is this weird business where you can make somebody go broke, and that means no more business for them.
That's good. That's a good point. I would say there's always going to be more out there.
Yeah, they just find the next customer.
So I don't think it'll ever die down.
No, I don't think it'll die.
Yeah, you're going to go down. You're going to go in the casinos. True. I mean, just about every bet in the casino, every table bet,
that's
again,
fair
unless
point.
you're counting cards, is negative, and they're packed. I was just at the casino throwing my money away on Friday night, and I was meeting a college buddy of mine who, I don't even want to talk about the insane numbers he plays at the blackjack table, but it's ridiculous. The casino was definitely not lacking with people. So, I think there'll always be the bettors out there, and I think they're really they're certainly catering to the lowest common denominator, and they are catering to those. Again, I think it's those parlays, people trying to hit the big one. It's the same person. I don't know. Do you play the lottery at all? Do you play like the Mega Millions?
I have. I don't play weekly, but yeah.
I'll play it every so often. But I'm not a consistent player of the lottery, just because mentally, when you feel like you only want to gamble on an edge. I don't even like playing blackjack or craps anymore, unless I'm doing it socially, because I feel like I hate gambling without an edge. I'll play poker, I'll play sports, I play the DFS, like things I feel I have an advantage in, and so it loses some of its interest to me. But I think the average person still loves it. There's still the person who, there's a reason they put the red and black and all the numbers up on the roulette table. What's hit, because someone's going to think that they've that red is due or red is hot or whatever, or vice versa. There's a lot of people out there who are going to continue to bet on sports. What you had the second part of your question. I forget. What
Yeah,
it
like
was.
do you think like sports betting media tries to shift to like again, it's a little bit of a conflict of interest, but like I don't even hear people say like the market says this. They go the sports we have it at 1.5. You're like, well, no, it's just the market. But if I open Seeking Alpha, it's like okay, the market is this,
That's
right?
right.
So it's like, do you get does it shift slightly to like, all right, we got to get a little bit more educated so people
Not
have a fighting chance.
Yeah, not in the so-called mainstream media, right? So you're not going
Yeah,
to see it there. It's like everything else. It's going to be online. It's
yeah,
going to be these. It's going to be accounts like
select.
yours. It's going to be
Yeah, or
those
yours.
are
Yeah,
the accounts bringing the truth. Hopefully, this podcast.
yeah,
Those are the ones who are going to be sharper. We will. I mean, maybe it'll be like like some of these podcasts have gotten bigger now than the CNNs and the Foxes
yeah.
and
That's a
all
fair
of them.
point.
Maybe will get bigger than ESPN and Fox Sports and as a group, a collective. That's possible. But I think the market. Well, I think probably the better analogy is more like a CNBC, right? So CNBC is still extremely popular in the business where we had it on every day at work. Like, there's nothing else that you're going to put on. Almost every trading floor has CNBC on in the background.
Yeah,
And I know a lot of people. You go to your country club, you go to the
yeah, it's
bar, CNBC is on. That's always going to be on. You're not going to necessarily have podcasts, but I think on your drive at the gym,
yeah,
whatever it is, you may listen to a more, something that's a little bit more in depth, a little bit more in detail. And I think that's the way we'll go. I don't think our pod. Look, I hope this podcast blows up to be
yeah.
huge.
Me
I don't
too.
think it'll ever get to that point
Yeah,
because it's a very niche. And I think the people who are interested in looking at this in a more deep way are going to really gravitate towards this. And but I think that's a long about way to answer. I don't think the mainstream media, the ESPNs, will ever do anything other than cater to the same people that the casino caters to, which
yeah.
is the
The
lowest common denominator.
Yeah, that's a fair point. And I guess there are places like VSiN, which is like a
Yeah,
version of that, right? Which is I guess, a little bit elevated,
it is.
aspect of talking about sports.
Yeah, they're entertaining and and some sharp.
Yeah,
They know a lot more than the average person. That's for sure on a VSiN. So yeah, I would agree. They're sort of a hybrid there. I would say.
yeah, 100%. Well, I hope it gets a little bit better. I just hope people can learn a little bit more, so that they're not just getting taken to because I think it's just getting more and more ubiquitous. Like even my wife, she'll be like the Super Bowl. She's like, I'm gonna bet on this, and you're like, well, that's crazy to me, but I don't. That's only gonna get bigger and bigger, right? Like,
Listen, my friend's sister, I hadn't spoken to her in a couple of years. She texted me about 2 months ago. She says, "Hey, you still involved in like that sports betting stuff?" And I said, "Yeah, absolutely." She's like, "You think you could teach me?" You know, yeah. I'm like, "Yeah, if you got an hour, sure." And she's great, but she's like, "Yeah, I could really use to make a couple of extra bucks." And I'm like,
oh
"Well, if
yeah,
you're going to try to make a couple extra bucks doing this, you probably don't even bother, unless you're looking to put in all the time that we talked about and building these models and whatnot." So I hate to, this is the reason that we don't get 10 million people watch these videos, because someone wants them to, because the people who get followed again are those who say it is easy.
yeah,
Just do what I'm doing,
yeah,
and you're going to be driving this Lamborghini as well.
yeah.
So,
In no time.
it doesn't really drive. It doesn't drive eyeballs, but the eyeballs that you get are much higher quality, and that's what we're looking for. So I know, and that's why I wanted to bring you on, and that's why I really appreciate you coming on, because I respect what you're doing on TikTok. I know you guys are very sharp, and you're very transparent, which is something not always seen in this industry. And that's what we're hoping to do on this podcast is to bring on sharp people. Everyone's going to have, kind of different takes and different ways of going about it. And like I talked about earlier, hopefully someone will pick up just one thing that you said here today and then build on that and maybe build the next really successful model. So I'm hoping that is the case with every podcast we do, but certainly with a lot of the information that you gave our guest today, I'm extremely appreciative, and I appreciate you coming on.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. And again, I'm hopeful I lived up to all of the other guests you've had, because if you haven't already, go and watch all of those interviews. Those are 10 out of 10 interviews. I watched every single one of them and learned a ton. So I couldn't have recommended them enough. And again, just thanks for having us, and thank you to all you do on social media and sharing all of these interviews, doing these interviews, and trying to make people better through the Sharp app and all the work that you guys do. So, couldn't thank you enough for having us, and yeah, good to finally connect.
I appreciate it, Seth. Thank you, sir.
Take care.
Bye. Thanks for watching, and don't forget to like and subscribe if you like this content.